Heidegger explicitly tells us that he's not, quote unquote, against technology. We're supposed to rethink or think more worthily technology or the technological essence. Thinking of the example of animals, it makes one wonder what the designation techne is supposed to mean at all. It's contrasted with, for the Greeks, with science, with episteme. If episteme, science, in the course of the West has been indeed recognized to be techne, where is the distinction supposed to be found? Watching animals amongst themselves, the younger animals learn from their parents. The deer gnaws away at some brush or whatnot. It weans the fawn off of the milk, the mother's milk. Shows that the greenery can be delicious source of food, as it were, nutrients. There's a learning there. The accusation of techne is sometimes put in terms of that it's something that can be learned without words, and that we have in the sciences, all the forms, like all the ology forms, the ology suffix, alluding to the logos. Science is supposed to be something more than the empirical, more than the apprenticeship, which even if it may involve some speech between the master candlestick maker or whatnot and the apprentice, on the whole, one can learn, let's say, embroidery or shoemaking by looking and repeating, just as we see with chiefly in the animal world. So what does it mean that the technological essence would, as it were, name the moment when we can no longer hold with science or episteme in this Western sense of this knowledge which can only be imparted through speech, and which is higher than mere apprenticeship and repetition of things. Socrates gives the simple example, which isn't totally, perhaps, it's not obvious why it's should impel us, but the example of, you can see the procedure for planting a seed under certain conditions, but then one can't see the answer as to why was it planted at a certain depth. You just know that it is to be planted at a certain depth. It seems that potentially you could see that, in terms of, you could see a storm blowing it away if it were too shallow, or if it were planted too deep, then you'll see that it would never spring up. Um, Clearly, there are some things conceptually which don't show up in a mirror, um, but if we're pressed to it, maybe the whole conception of the Greek conception of science is in some way faulty. Uh, but Heidegger still tells us, and maybe that's one meaning of the was heißt denken. What is what is thinking is that the what is what is our own is our own because like our name is our own. Um, the thinking is really what is our own thinking, and since the names are the house of being, uh, then being would be our own, whoever our names. Maybe it names a specific Dasein with a history, just as the human being and I is the same as its body. Perhaps a Dasein is the same as its um, millennial history, or deeper than millennial history. Um, so then, is the called thinking really our own thinking, so far as language is the house of being and language is what is our own, as in own most? Does being become specifically our own then through language in that sense, through naming? Uh, Presumably, you hear sometimes talk of there was a novelist who made a novel about ancient Egypt where he said the slaves did not have names. Presumably, there was a time before people had uh, names, their own names. Animals don't call themselves by names. They don't have their own name. They repeat to themselves. How so far is the individuating of Dasein the same as uh, uh, the house of being, a specific house of being by a specific language? And therefore, when Heidegger says, what would it be without us? How would things be without us? It's as though to say, how would it be without what is our own, without the name, which is the whole of language could be understood as a naming, um, a making of our own, making it our own. Um, just a slight consideration on the occasion of observing a deer and a fawn in